Welcome back to Dad's XP. I'm CJ and today we'll be looking at a modernized version of a classic JRPG, Star Ocean Second Story R. Now if you like this video, make sure you leave us a like and a comment and subscribe if you want to see more videos by dads like you for dads like us. Now while Star Ocean's not exactly a new game, this is a remake of a classic that was released all the way back in 1999 in North America. Now, the thought of playing something like that kind of scares you off given that older games tend to require a lot more of your time. I ask you to just hold your thoughts for just a moment and let me tell you why you shouldn't think that. Now, just to preface something really quick, I did play this game on PS5 originally. The footage that you're watching for this review, however, is from the Steam demo, so you can check that out if you'd like to. This game, honestly, does such an excellent job of respecting your time in a way that I think, and I wish that so many modern RPGs these days that are coming out would do. The game has fast travel, it has auto battling, it has so many ways for you to make the experience not feel like such a slog, which I feel like as a dad and as someone who's old, getting a little older, I want to have my time respected, and I don't necessarily love the idea of spending hours and hours and hours grinding when I don't want to, or because I have to. If I want to, then sure. Some games do make me want to do that, but a lot of these games that are, sort of stylized like traditional Final Fantasy games, they tend to, want you to have that sort of old school experience, and sometimes that can come at the cost of the user experience, at least in my opinion. Speaking of the user experience, let's talk about the game, at least visually and UI-wise for a second here. So, visually, obviously the game does not look like it came out in 1999 because it didn't. It came out in November of this year, at least this version. And it looks fantastic. It's using that style that a lot of these Square Enix titles have been using lately, like Octopath Traveler and things like that. It's not exactly the same, but it is very similar. They use this nice mix of sprite work with modern graphics that I find really charming. And while I do think that format is becoming slightly played out at this point, now that we've seen it from games like Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, things like that, but I do think it looks really, really good in this game, and the character sprite work is amazing. The way that they animate them in battle looks very, very nice. I like the character designs a lot. I like the juxtaposition between the futuristic style that the game can have at times and the sort of like traditional fantasy style that it can have at a lot of times. And then when it comes down to like UI stuff, it's pretty much your standard JRPG in terms of like menuing and things like that, except for in the combat, which I'll get to in just a moment. But in terms of your regular menus and things like that, it's pretty standard. Now, this game does have quite an extensive crafting system, which we will delve into a little bit later, but that menu system can be sort of cumbersome. There are some UI things that I think feel like they maybe needed a little bit more time to flesh out a more convenient way to access things, but other than that, I think the game visually looks very solid. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the music. Now, those of you who have watched my videos, or my reviews in particular, as opposed to my friend Paul that does the other reviews on this channel, you'll know that I love video game music. I think that it is incredibly important in a game, and this is the kind of game that I expect to have insanely good music, because it just has... I feel like JRPGs, like, having good music is like a must. There's something about it, and while there is nothing in this game musically that I think is bad by any means, there is not a single song while I was playing that I can really pinpoint really stuck out to me. Now, that's not to say that it's bad, it just wasn't like noticeably good. And some of you won't care much about that, and some of you will know exactly what I mean by that. It's passable, it's good enough, but it's not amazing. Outside of just the music, the sound effects for the game are generally, what you would expect. I will say that because of the way that combat works and the way that spells work and things like that, you can hear a lot of the same voice lines over and over and over again, and I find that to be pretty annoying, and I feel that it possibly could be due to lack of testing. Now, I do own the original of this game, but I did not play it yet, or have not had a chance to play it yet. So I don't know if that's something that they just kept from the original, but I found the repeated use of voice lines in combat to be annoying, especially when you're doing a lot of combat back to back to back to back. But outside of that, everything else, sound-wise, I think was done well. But what would a JRPG be without an amazing story? Well, it'd be Final Fantasy 13. No, I'm just kidding. So the story for this game starts out sort of differently depending on your choices. So you actually can choose between two different main characters. You can either play as Reina, who is a spellcasting female character, or you can play as Claude C. Kenny, who is a more melee-based male character. Now, whichever one you choose, it doesn't really matter. It affects the story in small ways, but it does affect how the game starts and certain conversations throughout the game. It also affects which party members you can obtain later in the game, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit. Regardless of who you start as, the game basically starts with Reina finding Claude in the forest by himself, and from there, their adventures sort of connect. You sort of go on this adventure with them. Now, I don't want to say too much, because depending on which side of the story you start on, you're basically privy to some knowledge that you wouldn't be otherwise, and that's true for both sides. You'll learn about both of those things, no matter which side you play as, but to avoid spoiling that part, I'm not going to say too much about the very, very beginning, but I will say the game picks up pretty quickly, and Reina and Claude will be off on an adventure to go investigate a big crater that was left in the planet by a meteor, and ever since that's happened, there's been a lot of bad occurrences and monsters and things like that. So that's sort of how you get kickstarted working together. You meet tons and tons of companions along the way. You get sidetracked a decent amount, but not too much. Like I said, this game isn't super long, so you don't have a ton of time to go and often do other things, but there is plenty to do if you so choose. I highly recommend that you look around and speak to people. And speaking of people, one of the cool things about this game is as a feature where you sort of go off on your own, and it'll play a cool animation where like your party members sort of walk away from you, and you can sort of explore by yourself. And what that allows is for you to have certain conversations with either party members or people that are in town or different important NPCs in the game without the rest of your companions. Now, sometimes it does involve them, but this is how you advance your relationships with your companions, whether you want friendship from that, romance, whether you want a negative friendship. There's lots of different things that you can get from these little cutscenes and interactions you can have with these NPCs, which was a nice system that I think, I would like to see in some other games. I think implementing it the way that they did could use a little bit of work, but I think the idea is very solid. Aside from that, choosing either one of them doesn't really matter. If you prefer to play as one over the other, you don't need to start a new game. You can play as, any character that you want within your party if you so choose. And that might sound kind of weird for a JRPG, because you might be thinking, hey, well, if it's, a turn-based JRPG, then, aren't you playing as everybody? It's not a turn-based JRPG, and that's the best part about Star Ocean Second Story R. It is more like an action game. Honestly, combat is very quick. You're doing a lot of dodging, you're doing a lot of countering, you're doing a lot of pre-planning, and fights are very fast. Even boss fights are pretty fast. Later in the game, they do end up taking a lot longer, which I think is good. It gives you time to get acclimated to a system that is pretty unforgiving at first, but the game does have a difficulty slider, so if you're struggling a little bit, you can change it. It also has a really, really impressive system where when you die, the game allows you to just try the fight again, and you can make adjustments to your party and your settings and things like that before you go into combat to give it another try, which I think is excellent. One of the coolest features I've seen in any game ever. And this game just does so many things right in terms of, features like you can avoid enemies. There are no random encounters in this game. You can also enable the conversations so that characters will just talk at like a normal pace and you don't have to press any buttons. But if you've already seen it and you're playing New Game Plus, like I have, you can skip all the cutscenes, you can skip all the dialogue, you can even fast forward through conversations. So if you're someone like me who I sometimes hate waiting for characters to actually say the line and I'm reading it already and I'm reading faster than they're speaking, you can just breeze through that part if you like. And it's easy enough. You just hold down a trigger if you're playing with controller and the conversation just goes. And features like that, I think, really, really shine a light on how excellent the user friendliness of this game is. And I have to wonder why that system just isn't a part of more games. Things like this are just so nice, especially in a remake. Like, if you're remaking a game, it should have cool features like this that make it additive to the original experience. I just wish that there were more games that had these kinds of features in them, because it just makes it where you don't feel like you get stuck and you've wasted all this time and now you got to redo all this stuff. Those little things just add up to make it feel like such a good experience that it's easy to get sucked into. And I feel like a lot of RPGs have this issue where they have a lot of breakpoints in them. And what that means is, for me at least, is there's a lot of points in the game while you're playing where you'll hit a certain point where it just feels like, okay, I can stop here. Then you never come back to it. I do that all the time. I'm sure some of you do that too. I know you do. I know you do. Because I do it all the time. And I know my friends do it all the time. And it's just really easy to do, you know, especially with RPGs, given that they're so long. Except this one isn't. This game, honestly, you can finish this game in like 30, 40 hours. Easy peasy. So jumping back real quick, I just want to talk about some of the characters that you can get for your party. There are some characters that are locked to whether or not you started as Reyna, and there are some characters that are locked if you started as Claude C. Kenny. That being said, there are, I believe, 13 or 12 characters that you can add to your party. Now, your party can only consist of, I think it is 8 characters at max, so you will need to do a second playthrough if you want to get all the characters and experience their stories and what they're like, which I would encourage. Like I said, this game is not very long. I think replayability-wise, there's a lot there. You can miss stuff. There's stuff you can do on a second playthrough. It has New Game Plus, which is huge in my book. That's a ton of points right there. New Game Plus, please, more games. They need it. Because sometimes you just want to play a game and you don't want to start over from scratch. And that also brings me to another point, which is this game has something like over 100 different endings now. Take that with a grain of salt, because I believe that different endings includes like the endings for some of your party members, which are very mildly different. And some of them are quite a bit different. But I don't think it certainly does not warrant, enough of a change for you to go and play through the game 100 plus times. That's absolutely not something you should do. Just watch a YouTube video of it. That's what I would do. So with all that being said, if you're wondering, should a dad play? My recommendation is yes. I give this game an 8 out of 10. Star Ocean Second Story R is a fantastic JRPG that I think more people need to experience. And I wish that so many of the features that they included in this game would be included in more RPGs that are coming out now, that are being made now. So if you enjoyed this review, make sure to leave us a like, leave us a comment, let us know what games you want us to review, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos for dads like you. My name is CJ with Dads XP, and I'll see you guys on the next one.